All right, benvenuti a tutti. Welcome everyone to this symposium on the artist Alberto Burri, whose retrospective exhibition celebrating the centenary of his birth is currently on display at the Guggenheim Museum. With us today are the two curators of that exhibition and 5 scholars from Italy, some of whom have personal connections with the artist. Before we begin, I'd like to thank on this side of the Atlantic, the Guggenheim Museum and the Fordham Dean's Office, my colleague Richard Hugh and Angela Mikowski and Katerina Fastana for all the work they've done preparing this symposium. On the other side, I'd like to thank Sapienza University, Lorenzo Canova, and Lucio Ubertini for bringing us our guests from Italy. And now I'd like to introduce Professor Ubertini, who is the prime mover behind this symposium. He is somebody with an uncanny ability to get people together over lovely lunches and make really nice things happen. He is professor at the University of Rome at La Sapienza and at the University of Perugia. He is the director of the Honors Center of Italian Universities, otherwise known as H2CU at Sapienza University, a consortium he founded in 2004. It is this organization that has made this conference possible. He is holder of the UNESCO Chair in Water Resource Management and Culture. This is one of many positions he's held on commissions and committees dealing with water management. Currently, he's a member of the Scientific Committee of the World Water Assessment Program of UNESCO and president of the Italian National Committee of the UNESCO International Hydrological Program. He has been the Italian representative in several official events at the United Nations and also at the UNESCO Intergovernmental Council. He's been an invited lecturer and researcher in several institutions, MIT, Princeton, and the Indian Institute of Technology. Professor Ubertini's research has appeared in national and international publications, as well as the mass media. Water and its management is Professor Ubertini's field, but he's also very interested in art. For this reason, I'm taking this opportunity to give him a copy of H2O, which is a catalog put together by contemporary artists who also address the work of water in their work. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ubertini.
After this presentation, excuse me, I go out and I come back next tomorrow. Nobody here because the introduction is, thank you very much, Joanna, for the presentation. My most gratitude to Fordham University, especially Dr. Joanna Issak, Dr. Richard Hugh, for the incredible organization of this event. Thank you very much. I would like to introduce my speech telling you how I have been involved in Burri. There are several motivations. In particular, I live in Perugia, and Città di Castello, where Burri was born, is located in the Umbria region, where Perugia is the capital of the Umbria region. I am, as mentioned Joanne, deeply passionate about contemporary art, and my opinion, I think that Burri is a very, very important artist for the last century. In my opinion, is a very giant of the contemporary art. But I am Italian, and the Burri is Italian. And it is not for complimentary. No, it's really, I think that Burri is a leader in the contemporary art of the last century. And the Guggenheim, tomorrow I will be to see the exhibition, but the friends that yesterday went to the exhibition, I read also a newspaper, and really this exhibition is wonderful, and the curator, Emily Brown, in my view, is the title of the exhibition is perfect. She interpreted not only the artist Burri, but the man Burri, with the title of the exhibition. The title, I can speak very, very, very free, because I am not involved in the art. I am professor of engineering, and I can speak in this occasion without the colleagues that when I speak my subject, it is necessary to have a particular attention for the world. But in this case, I try to see my opinion as the title of the exhibition is not enough of the success of the exhibition. But I think it is very important, like the title of the paper, the book that we write in different subjects. The third motivation, because I am professor in Sapienza, and when I started to see what the artist Burri was, I knew Burri because we are very close to the football stadium when we stayed in the Sunday to see the Perugia football team, and we have the two chairs very close. But never I had the occasion to speak with the Burri. But I remember this man that when Perugia made a goal, he was one of the most excited the people. And when I read the different situation regarding the life of Burri, I read in the document of the Fondazione Burri that he want to fix the Sapienza University as the university to allocate the referment of his artistic work. Sapienza University, in particular, the humanistic area and I think that it is important for this anniversary, the centennial anniversary of the Burri, the Sapienza must do some event to underline this fact. In March, we organized a meeting in Rome And today we organizing a meeting in New York. This symposium is particularly relevant because we have the connection with the exhibition in Guggenheim. The aim of our activity is the underline the collaboration between Italian universities and the American universities. When 10 years ago we launched the idea to have a collaboration in particular with the university in New York and the university in Boston. We had the main scope to permit to the Italian student to stay in a US university for 2 semesters and to have the possibility to take the 2 degree, the second level Italian magistrale, laurea magistrale, and the master of the US university. We make an agreement with Columbia University, Polytechnic is Professor Facocchio is here, and was Professor Facocchio one of the professor that received my call, and very often to go in this direction. Professor Facocchio was in Polytechnic universities, and now it is a Polytechnic University of New York University, more or less the name. This name, and just last year, the Fordham and the Sapienza, our center, make a very large agreement to have the possibility to continue this way to permit the Italian student to study for 2 semesters and to have this possibility, but open also a view for other activity. The other activity, and I mentioned because we are in the preliminary step, and I think that the progress, the next possible initiative is to create really an international university where students are students from Italy and from US, where professors are professors from Italy and from US. The staff, really the one international university in a real sense, a joint venture between the 2 university or more than 2 universities. Because in our center we have other Italian university. It's possible to have this possibility. In other words, I'm thinking to work in 2 lines. one is in a humanistic area, and one is engineering architecture area. In the these two lines, I synthesized, like I said, the world heritage. World heritage just in the UNESCO environment. The UNESCO environment, you know that we have the world heritage, the chair that I received from UNESCO is the chair in water and the culture, because I think that also Burri is the son of the water, because Burri live close to the Tiber River. The Tiber River and the Arno River delimited an area in Italy where I think, I don't know if in the world there is another part where the concentration of the culture or concentration of the art, you must think to Florence and Rome. Florence and Rome, and I suppose that in this case we have a possibility really to have a laboratory unbelievable in the world. This is the intention that I think that Fordham is particularly attempted to in the possibility to have this a new strategy for the center. However, now we come back to Burri, and I thank you very much for this occasion, and I hope to have a very nice future. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you very much. Our first speaker is Professor Emily Braun. She is the guest curator of the current retrospective Alberto Burri, The Trauma of Painting. She is distinguished professor at Hunter College and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. A specialist in 20th century Italian art, Professor Braun has written extensively on art and culture of the fascist period. Her publications include Mario Storoni and Italian Modernism, Art and Politics Under Fascism, and De Curico and America. She is the co-curator and co-author of The Power of Conversation, Jewish Women and Their Salons. That catalog won the National Jewish Book Award. Her other area of expertise is Cubism. For the last 28 years, she's been the curator of the Leonard Lauder Cubist collection, and she co-curated the exhibition of the collection last year at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The catalog received the 2014 Award for Excellence from the Association of American Art. Today, she'll speak about the Burri exhibition she organized. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you very much, Joanna, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. And thank you very much to, is it Acedua Chile, for their sponsorship. E a proposito di calcio, non so se avete notato, ma nel negozio del Guggenheim si è in vendita una bellissima maglia di calcio, fatto proprio per la mostra, con il nome di Burri e il numero 15. Abbiamo capito. So I wanted to speak today about several issues pertinent to the exhibition and its organization. And also I took as my title the two terms, an oxymoronic term, unbalanced equilibrium, which comes from Burri's own mouth, equilibrio squilibrato. And he described his work that way, over and over again in the late in life interview with Stefano Zorzi that was published in 1996, shortly after Burri's death. It's an interesting interview. It's full of information, but it was never edited by the artist himself after it was recorded. And it is also very much the interview of an artist at the end of his life, looking back upon his life. So what is said in that interview also has to be taken with a grain of salt to a certain degree. Nonetheless, Equilibrio Squilibrato is, I think, a very appropriate way of understanding Burri's oeuvre on the whole. As one looks at Burri's work from the beginning to the end of his career and each individual series, you can see that there is always a tension between things holding together and falling apart. And I think that this is very much related to his personal experiences and to his biography. So in the retrospective, we attempted to draw out major biographical themes as well as artistic ones. Go ahead.
Just forget it. Just forget it this time.
If you want to, you can see. So I'm showing you here a photograph of the installation of the Burri exhibition at the Guggenheim. And the installation is, as I'm going to take you through in a moment, arranged according to series, but drawing out certain major themes that I will also discuss today. In order to understand Burri's work, I started on a journey myself, and that was to his hometown of Città di Castello. And I went there, I think, as early as 4 years ago, in order to meet the Fondazione Burri, beginning with Presidente Calavese and now Presidente Corra, who have been incredibly helpful and collaborative in this project. And as I walked through the museum, I was actually stunned by what I saw, because I had been familiar with Burri's Sacchi, above all, and his Legni, but I was not aware of the diversity of his work, nor the continuity. And I was also struck by the way in which the artist conceived and put his museum together. Chiara Sartenese, the curator of the Fondazione Burri, said to me, in words that came through her father, Nemo Sartenese, that for Burri, everything always had to be tutto sotto controllo, everything under control. And that is also another way of saying equilibrio squilibrato. That is, no matter what he went through in his life, and no matter what his work showed, there was always going to be that sense of it just being held together, being under control. And the finest manifestation of his control was to create this museum just the way he wanted it, and to hang the pictures just the way he wanted them to be hung. I think this is an extraordinary place, and of course, fortunately, it has very few visitors, which is a good thing. Burri knew it would have few visitors. When asked why didn't he create his museum in Rome, he said, if people want to see my work, they will come to Città di Castello. And when I describe it to people, I say it's sort of like going to Kansas in the middle of nowhere in the United States, except that it's filled with Piero della Francesca and other great art everywhere. But you do have to make a pilgrimage to go there. And once you arrive, the works are hung in this judicious, contemplative manner, which creates a sequence as you go through, and you understand his work in full through the series that he established. So my first lesson was to see how the artist saw the work in his own eyes. Then we went down the street, and of course we visited these two museums very often, many times, to the ex Seccatoi del Tabacco, the old tobacco drying sheds, which Burri began to paint in 1978, shortly after the successful tour of his retrospective exhibition in the United States. And it recently occurred to me that the importance of this retrospective for Burri in '78, because he hung his series at the Guggenheim in one room, and he began with his retrospective to embark on a retrospective period in his work. And he did that within the campanone of the ex Seccatoi del Tabacco. That is, he conceived cycles. And the idea of a cycle is in itself retrospective. And he went back and he elaborated on certain themes and colors and biomorphic and geometric forms that were always there in his work. And he created these cycles, which were also prompted by his experience of hanging his work in the sanctified churches in Italy. where the naves are separated by bays. So he envisioned his work over space and over time. The late work, that is, the cellotext, is therefore very retrospective, deliberately so. And I think as you go through the Guggenheim exhibition, and this has been mentioned to me by many people, you have a sense of an artist who is going through a process of healing. And then when you reach the late work, there is a sense of calm and serenity and a consciousness about working late in life. So let me just speak about a few of the biographical details and historical details, which I felt were very important. As I hope for those of you who have seen the exhibition, history is key for this show. And I'm an art historian who's really a cultural historian. I work in an interdisciplinary fashion. And Burri's work, I do not think can be understood without the deep historical context. So as a curator, you have a choice. You can illustrate that history with documents in a vitrine, which is not a very lively thing to do, even though historically the documentation is very important. Or you can show the audience, particularly in this case, the American audience, a sense of the devastation, the destruction, the poverty, and the trauma that Italy experienced, and Burri as well. So I chose to begin the exhibition on the ground floor with an edited loop of Luce Giornale documentary film of the bombing of Genoa, Milano, and Napoli. And here you see a still from the film. And this documented the bombing of the Allies in Italy from the spring of '43 to the following year. And the point was, particularly for American audiences, to understand that the Allies had bombed Italy as well as Germany, and that they had to do so as part of their invasion and up the Italian peninsula to get rid of the Nazis and the Nazi occupation. Burri was not here at this time because he was captured as a medic with the fascist army in North Africa in the spring of 1943, and several months later was sent to a prisoner of war camp in Hereford, Texas. However, it's images of bombed Naples that you see in this film that he would have seen when his boat docked back in Naples in February of 1946. So this visual, I think, made it much more emphatic than documents as to the historical context of the exhibition. I also think at the Guggenheim Museum, which is very teleological in its deterministic architecture, has to begin and end with a bang. Unfortunately, literally here as well as figuratively. And therefore some drama was needed also for the exhibition visitor. It's this film, therefore, that sets the stage for an understanding that Burri biographically was a doctor who interrupted his medical studies as he volunteered for the Ethiopian War, and that is Burri on the far left in the photograph. And that it was while he was in prisoner of war camp in Hereford, Texas, that he stopped practicing medicine, either because he chose to or he was not permitted to in the camp, and began to paint. I chose not to include any of the early figurative works in the exhibition. And I will remind you that nor does Burri in his own museum include any of these works. However, they appear in other ways in the show. And then I did choose to include, however, works that have never before been shown, and the foundation wasn't sure at first when I wished to exhibit them. And those are drawings that I believe he must have done in the camp or shortly thereafter. Most of them are hallucinatory, memory-driven scenes of trauma, and others could have been done ostensibly from life, since he was a doctor and he served as a doctor on the front lines in North Africa, even after he was captured as a prisoner. This theme of being a doctor, of feeling the body, of knowing the body inside out, of being familiar with wounds and physical trauma is also key for the exhibition. So I did include these. Let me take you now through the exhibition briefly, and we'll come back to the biographical element. After the films, the first thing you see are the transparent plastics hanging in the high gallery. These are hung in a way that Burri intended, suspended, so you look through them, they're see-through pictures, they're colorless monochromes, and he hung them this way in the foundation. although he was also influenced to do so by James Johnson Sweeney, who invented this technique of suspended canvases. The way that the plastic is manipulated also, I think, is very suggestive of the idea of trauma, both physical and psychological. These are out of chronological sequence, but this is the only regular space in the Guggenheim Rotunda, so this is the only place they could be hung, but it made sense to do so. Then the exhibition proceeds chronologically and thematically, fortunately, because Burri's work proceeds in series. So it's really a perfect match for the Guggenheim architecture. So it begins with the Neri and then the Gobi, and I deliberately chose 2 red gobi. There are very few gobi, most of them are red, but I wanted red in particular because there is a coloristic theme which is picked up throughout the exhibition. Then ramp by ramp, we proceed through the different series until we arrive at the last ramp where we have the Creti and the Celotex. We had to put the Celotex, which are the last works, at the very beginning of the ramp because the height of the walls on which they are hung is not permitted on the other end. The ceiling is too low. But that's okay. Necessity is the mother of invention, and we found that to have these black works at the beginning of this last part of the exhibition was very dramatic and helped to enliven and make the space dynamic. And then you reach the end of the show with the last black creto and, of course, the drawings. So I put the drawings, which are his beginnings, deliberately at the end so that the exhibition ends at the beginning. And this theme of trauma is reinforced by Burri's biography and personal experiences. In between, of course, we have the James Johnson Sweeney miniatures, which Sweeney was sent, Burri sent Sweeney and his wife every year, a little miniature, Buon Anno, Capodanno, and Buon Natale. And at his death, Sweeney gave these back to the Fondazione Burri. We borrowed them, and it was a wonderful institutional collaboration, and also reinforced the long connection between Sweeney and the Guggenheim and Alberto Burri. And we designed a case and exhibited it here. For me, this was also important to show viewers the extraordinary ability of Burri to create on a miniature scale as well as on a grand scale. And in fact, the details and the proportions in these small works are exactly like the large ones. These have been a particular hit with the general public. Everyone wants one of these. And then we also made room for Ghibellina. It was very important to me to have Ghibellina in some way, the Creto di Ghibellina in the exhibition. And yes, we could have done it with photographs and models, but as with the bombing footage that opens the show, I felt it was really important to have the visitor experience the place as a site of memory, time, and history. And I was very fortunate to have seen a film by Petra Nordkamp on the Nuova Ghibellina, a filmmaker, this Dutch filmmaker who's been very influenced by Michelangelo Antonioni. And it was this sense of natural sound and slowness that she was able to capture the Creto in situ, and then with the camera as if you were there to experience it. So that gives you a sense of the sequence of the exhibition, and now I just wanted to draw out some of the major themes that we intended to show throughout it. For me, the most important theme was that of touch. And touch is the vehicle for it's the primary sense, and it's what distinguishes Burri's work from all of his contemporaries. Tactility, the hands as the vehicle to the mind, to cognition, which Maria Montessori proved, and also to the emotions, which modern neuroscience has proved. Tactility is what differentiates his work completely from his contemporaries, and I know that there will be a talk today about the debt of this, of course, to Brancalini and polymaterialism. But Burri really transforms the history of modernist collage into a different scale and a different affective power because of the tactile quality of his work. And touch is believing, as we see in the Caravaggio, and therefore the theme of trauma becomes even more vivified for the viewer, I think, as you experience every stitch, every pull, every tear by projection. The sense of wanting to put your hands over these pictures, which you cannot do, and also feeling them on your own surface. So both haptic or active touch and passive touch. And this theme of tactility runs throughout Burri's work, even in the late Creti and Salopo. So even when we begin the exhibition, tactility is made emphatic with the series of the blacks. And it's also clear, as I hope to show throughout the exhibition, that the tactile is tied to the material, and the material is tied to Burri's revolutionary treatment of monochrome painting. So monochrome painting is one of the chief themes of the exhibition. Not just any type of monochrome, but the material and embedded monochrome. And this begins in his first series with the blacks, because what we found in collaboration with the Vatican conservators and also working with my colleague Carol Stringari, who's the deputy director of the Guggenheim, she and I will be speaking later today, is that underneath two of the blacks in our exhibition, and probably more, are these early pictures that he painted in Hereford, Texas. And Burri said that he destroyed those pictures except for very few, although we know he sent some home by the Red Cross. And clearly what he meant by destroying them is that he blacked them out. He embedded them in black paint. So these early black monochromes, which Robert Rauschenberg saw in Rome in 52 and 53, are embedded blackout pictures. And part of the texture that results from them is because he had layers of paint over these early pictures. So this is the first picture in the exhibition proper, the Nero Petrani, and this is an infrared reflectography view of the picture on the back of the canvas. And here's another one of these amazing monochromes, all black, a material monochromes made of tar and oil and sometimes pumice stone rubbed in. The theme of the black monochrome, the material monochrome, continues throughout the exhibition in the plastics, in the woods. And in the woods, of course, one is reminded that the original black painter's pigments from the Renaissance onwards were bone black and carbon black. That is, fire is what made these original artistic pigments. And as a doctor, Burri was he was trained in organic chemistry, right, and physics besides biology, but the organic chemistry element was very important to his manipulation of materials. And then we end with the black on black pictures as well. So it's extraordinary, I think, as you go throughout the show to see the different nuances of black that are created according to the manipulation of materials. And then we have the whites. And just to remind you how revolutionary Burri's monochromes are, consider the tradition of the monochrome in 20th century modernism. A monochrome is conceived of by the Russians, Malevich and Rodchenko, and then later artists such as Albers or Ad Reinhardt, whether they're working in red, black, or white, is always smooth, even, uniform, geometric in modulation, and also color is sublimated to the sense of light. Burri's work is just the opposite. It's about texture, the materiality, heaviness, and earthly matter. And there is no precedent for this. I'll come back to other material painters, but not material monochromes. For me personally, the key to Burri's work, the interpretive key, were his whites. His series of Bianchi are actually not that well studied, and he devotes a room to them in his Fondazione. But no one really ever looked at these very carefully, and in it, I think, are the keys to his entire career. And as we began to examine the whites, including this example, we realized that white operates in three ways. One is as a color, its optical and physical properties. And I'll come back to the physical properties in a moment. Secondly, as a process to whiten. After all, an Bianchino was a house painter, and many of Burri's whites look like they have been painted with a trowel. They have been painted with a trowel. And then Biancaria. The idea of white as a noun or as a material. And this has been overlooked, he made his canvases not just out of sacks, but out of used linens, pillowcases, bed sheets, and even nightgowns. And in his use of the white as material and color, creamy, opalescent, warm, cold whites, and also with rubbing in pumice stone or using zinc versus titanium whites to create a sense of these peeling walls. Now, how is this a monochrome? Well, it's a monochrome because it looks like a peeling wall. And if you look at walls around us, walls are monochrome, and they have paint layers underneath. So what Burri gives you a sense of is a single colored field that's beginning to peel and blister away and reveal colors underneath. There's a lot of references to natural monochromes in Burri's work, such as the land, the body, the skin, and walls. And this idea of natural monochromes is something that American artists would focus on in the 1960s, much later. And the theme of white, of course, goes back all the way up through the Creti. And this is where the physical properties of white are so interesting, because the Creti are made with white zinc pigment, not just any pigment. It had to be white zinc, which is a pigment that was invented in the 1830s, and it is a very brittle paint. So Burri would deliberately underbind it. He put smaller amounts of vinegar, which he used as a binder, this Elmer's glue, in order that he would make it crack deliberately. There's allusions to Old Master painting, but also to Death Valley, which he frequently photographed while he was in California. So he was very aware of the physical as well as the optical properties of white pigments. The sacks. Another theme I wanted to address was to put the sacks in proper historical perspective, even though they have been written about thoroughly. I did not include this work in the exhibition. First of all, it's on the walls of the museum, so I couldn't have it. But in a way, I didn't want it. This work has been fetishized as the first sacco, but it is not the first sacco because it's pieces of burlap or burlap that has been covered in white paint. And the first sacchi of 1950 used the sack as both the ground support of the canvas, such as this one, another example of a natural monochrome. This enormous work is in Düsseldorf, where the exhibition, by the way, will travel after it closes in New York. It's going to go to the Nord Rhine-Westfalen in Düsseldorf. So it was important to us to show the public how he made his sacks, how he attended to the backs as well as the front. So we chose to show one in both the recto and the verso. I also wanted to make references both in the sacks and in the ferri to the historical context of Burri's work, including references to the Madonna del Parto, his beloved painting that was up the road in Monterpi. And in this sacco, for example, the tongue-shaped wound with the lacing is a direct reference to the open slits of the Madonna's dress and the lacing. And then, of course, the tent-like form in this ferro, where Burri has deliberately painted the gash red in order to refer also to the theme of parturition or childbirth. The connections between Burri and St. Francis of Assisi have been well established by Arcangeli and other Italian scholars. And I have to say that the work of Brandi and Argan in particular were absolutely important for our research. Their writings on Burri are still extraordinary and very illuminating. And the more and more we looked, we realized that works such as the Guggenheim Sacco is filled with the iconography of St. Francis, the stigmata, the stigmata of the red dots, the wound in the side of the Christ, which Burri has painted black and added the vinaville mucus-like substance, the suggested congealing wound, and the stroke of gold, because St. Francis received the stigmata on rays of gold. So never literally, and nor was he religious, nonetheless, Burri is making these references to what is essentially a Catholic humanist Italian culture all through his work. And of course, the associations of penitent robes and the large-scale sacchi. The shame, the poverty, the humiliation of Italy post-fascism is a theme that is drawn out in the exhibition and in the work. And it's also done so in the catalog, where I make the comparison to neo-realist cinema, which is extremely connected, in my opinion. And I was not surprised when I found the cover for the Criterion collection of Paisan. They really made it look like a Burri. So if you go on to the Criterion collection and order your DVD, that's what the cover of your disc looks like, with the stars and stripes and the material that's been stitched. It was actually my desire to screen 2 films in the exhibition. One was going to be a 5-minute clip of Terra Trema, and the other was going to be a clip of Deserto Rosso because of clear iconographic, coloristic, and thematic connections between them. But I could not do so. We actually attempted to show the films during the design stage, and I realized that it was unfair to Burri to have two other auteurs in the same space as him. So we drew out that connection in the catalog instead. And of course, the Flowers of St. Francis by Rossellini. And then the other main influence, the other main theme of the exhibition, besides touch, the monochrome, Burri's manipulations of material, the expression of trauma, was his influence. And I felt it was very important. I mean, you all know, coming from Italy, how important Burri is, but the Americans are very chauvinistic, and it was really necessary to interrupt the usual narrative of post-war art in both Europe and the United States, and document this influence of Burri in a way that was not just about the usual story with Robert Rauschenberg. So that's what I attempted to do. And of course, Burri was also influenced by other artists. But first of all, we had to put him in the context of material painting and painting of the body in post-war Europe. And he is a part of that collective experience and expression, and the phenomenological approach to understanding artworks. So clearly his peers are Giacometti, Fautrier, Dubuffet, and Bacon. All artists, all of whom experienced horrors from a distance. None of them had the same experience that Burri did as a doctor, as a frontline combatant, and as a prisoner of war. He's really unique in that experience. So Burri takes these allusions to the body and to trauma and to material, but he moves into a completely abstract idiom, which these artists never did, and he lets the materials speak for themselves. He took from Dubuffet and Miro certain strategies. He was very influenced by the calligraphy of Miro and clay, and he saw what Miro and Dubuffet were doing with tar. So that was a direct stimulus to work in unorthodox materials. But he also transformed Dubuffet's wall paintings, graffiti paintings, or even later, Tapier's paintings of walls are very different from Burri as well. And he did this, and again, in a non-literal way through the monochrome, and these peeling monochromes that are analogous to walls. There is a strong dialogue with Lucio Fontana, that's clear. Artists are involved in dialogues with other artists. And then, of course, we have the story of Rauschenberg visiting the studio. But what is lesser known is that Cy Twombly also visited Burri's studio and would have seen the work elsewhere, the Galleria Lavalesco, at the Fondazione Origine, and in other places. What I tried to do is show that we went way beyond the combines. It's not just that Rauschenberg saw Burri's textile assemblages. He saw his muffe and then went back and did dirt paintings. He saw his embedded material blacks and then went back and embedded his own black paintings that were different before then. And then Twombly, this was a revelation. I mean, Twombly, when you look at some of the Burris, like this magnificent one in Turin, done in 1952, which was too big to lend and wouldn't have fit into the Guggenheim. You see the drips, the graffito, this combination of lusciousness and scatological imagery, which is very, very much Twombly. And later in life, when Marisa Volpi interviewed Twombly and asked him who were the two Italian artists that interested you most, he responded, of course, Morandi and Burri. And even some of the penile shapes and what one critic referred to as the ejaculations on Burri's surfaces, which were done with blobs of indigo. One thinks, of course, of Twombly's work, which changed significantly after he saw Burri's. These are two Twombly on the left and Burri's Volvo, where you see this reference to this ejaculation or body fluids on the canvas. The other thing I noted is that Burri's ferri, which were done in the late 50s and exhibited in the Martha Jackson Gallery in 1960, may or may not have been seen by Richard Serra, but certainly they are a bridge between traditional welded metal sculptures and the threatening industrial reality of Richard Serra's works. And Serra was traveling in Italy in 1966 on a Fulbright, but could have seen the work much earlier. So what interested me was how Burri anticipated this younger generation of 60s artists. And this show makes the argument that he is a precursor of post-minimalist art. For example, the Gobi clearly would have been seen by Lee Montague, but they were also widely publicized in an article in Art News in 1964. And then one of the transparent plastics was exhibited in the second document, excuse me, in 1964 in Germany, which Eva Hesse visited. So when you think of Eva Hesse's work and wounds and cocoons and body and the use of plastics and latex, and also her stitching and unstitching, even if she didn't see Burri, you can see how Burri anticipated a lot of the iconography, trauma, and body consciousness of 1960s feminist art, with no feminist program at all. That is to say, Burri was, didn't need to be a feminist or be involved in psychoanalysis. He had this medical background and knew the body and had his own reasons to express similar attitudes. So I wanted to end there. I think my time has also run up. And thank you very much.
I think that we finish the presentation, and after we can open a discussion, or John, or at the end of the presentation. The first Italian speaker is Alberto D'Ambroso. The Italian speakers are part involved in the Sapienza area of the pupils of the School of Art History in Rome, particularly Giulio Argan. Maurizio Calvesi is the, I remember that because I want to say a few words. However, is the Brandi, the Argan, and Maurizio Calvesi. Uscita dopo, quando vieni, when is your turn to speak about everything. I know Maurizio Calvesi because he's really a leader in the last few years to open however, Maurizio Calvesi is the president of the Fondazione Burri for many years, and also we have a particular attention to Maurizio for the activity in the sense that the life of Burri. Alberto is the professor in Accademia delle Belle Arti di Foggia, and now the Martedì Critici, when we are speaking like a Catholic, we have the Friday. It's Martedì, it's new. And however, the Alberto, please come to.
Thank you.
Facciamogli un applauso, Alberto.
No, dopo, gli applausi dopo. Thank you very much, Lucio. Yes, I'm here representing Fine Art Academy of Foggia, but my background is in Rome, in particular with Professor Maurizio Calvesi, who is my mentor, but not only mine, Lorenzo Canova as well. And so I'm here because my formation with him, and so I'm going to speak about Alberto Burri reading an essay wrote a few years ago by Maurizio Calvesi for a presentation here in New York City And Maurizio Calvesi asked me to tell you that, unfortunately, because of his age, he is now 88 years old, he couldn't come here, but he would love to stay with us today for this important day for Alberto Burri, since he was one of the first art critic, art historian, who wrote about Burri in 1952-53. So it was one of the first also who recognized the importance of Alberto Burri in a period when Burri was not considered not only from Italian critic but international critic. So I am going to read this essay that he wrote 5 years ago for an exhibition of Burri here in New York City. The visual art, the title is Alberto Burri's Cretineri. The visual arts can reflect with the very same immediacy of a mirror intimate details that belong to each and every one of us. The metaphor of the mirror is most apt when describing Burri's paintings, as what they represent are deeply profound psychological and biological portraits. Yet, perhaps more importantly, they implicitly call into question notions held by ourselves with regards to our identity. When we stand in front of a mirror asking ourselves, who am I? The mirror's face clouds over, pausing before preferring its reply. At times, we are engulfed by an empty image of nothingness, or indeed by the murky speculum of St. Augustine, and described in Platonic writings, in which we blindly feel the presence of an elusive yet discernible entity. Burri's paintings are like a shady mirror that responds to our naive questioning with the density of silence. His later paintings push even more so the boundaries of inexorable blackness. They are mirrors of profound Freudian and etiological depth, yet at the same time they express morality and teleology, reflection of cause and motivation and tension and aims. Concurring with the entirely cogent conclusion, which is open to a wealth of other possibilities, is the sheer strength of impulses inherent in the physical shapes and the order of their structure, which with their own energy propagate a self-generating power. The logic behind the painting structure is in essence responsible for the absolute need for this impulse. Their disturbing density is fully assimilating, as can be seen by the organic substance of matter color. Black and red are the two colors most used by Burri. They do not conflict with each other. On the contrary, they grow in straight side by side. Burri's work appears to exalt the beauty of red and black. They unleash the tremendous energy through the constrained juxtaposition of their blatant symbolism and vitality, the color red bent on obliterating the other. Yet, concealed behind the aesthetic harmony between these two dominant colors is a tumultuous struggle. It is a thought, the declamatory and inflamed violence of is challenging the wall of negativity of the other, smashing through its barriers, its impenetrable diaphragm, its mystery. This enduring battle, which is so cruelly exquisite, does eventually draw the conclusion. Like all harmonious and palpable organisms, it develops from its origins to its dissolution. And it does have an end, an outcome, a conclusion. Only at the very end is black victorious and inevitably so. Towards the end of this journey, Burri epitomized through his work the uncompromising and once again revolutionary invention or reinvention, which is now absolute, of black. We now realize that his artistic journey is much like the pilgrimage of life. It simply cannot detach itself from this reality with the ruthlessness of life and its sublime final conclusion, the fruits of a passionate eros, and the threshold of infinity, and heralded by Thanatos. In his later years, from the early 70s onwards, Burri only used black in his paintings. His Tutto Nero cycle is one of his most troubling and evocative manifestations. Moreover, the artist had to grapple with the exacting demands of creating varying shades of black on his panels and of treating the painting surface in different ways using the same material. In his Anotasi cycle, dating from 1987, roughly translated as the night beckons, the paint applied to the text superimposes darker and opaque sections against a gray background, suffused in a restrained luminosity. The relationship between the varying shades of black, the movement of the outline shades, and the dialogue between the different textures of the paint culminate in a solemn silence, much like a landscape or cityscape seen in the darkness of night, yet devoid of any reference to the natural world. They are, in essence, much like chorister chanting with sealed lips. The interplay that exists between the black outlines against the deep gray of the background is subdued and null. The background has the opacity of a dimly lit light, similar to the color of ash blanketing a smoldering fire. Just the dual voices sing out in harmony, yet each is distinctive as they alternate between soloist and accompanist. Only rarely do they come together, thereby creating a third sottovoce harmony. This is the kingdom of the shadows, where visual impact no longer triumphs. The contrast between tones is no longer celebrated, and the viewer is quite literally left to grope for stimulus. What we are witnessing is an empty space, with the objects conveying a meaning amidst unfathomable depth. This has an almost calming effect, unlike the feelings provoked by the earlier Tutto Nero cycle dating from the 70s, as is evinced by the paintings exhibit here, which draw inspiration from his experimentations with this critique. The 1973 critiques were made with kaolin, which was dried under monitored conditions. Their surface cracks create a work of art with fissures of varying thickness imprinted in the fused light of the white kaolin to produce balanced and calibrated patterns. Or indeed, as in these particular works, the effect is trapped by the mesh of black, producing almost the opposite effect, with his flaunting of harshness and atrocities of Issak and combustioni. The work is achieved by differently sculpted furrows, much like those found in Burri's scritti bianchi. The radiating light in its scritti bianchi creates patterns of refinement with patches of flatness contrasting with patches of cracked sections of varying dimensions and flourishes of great agility similar to the acrobatic virtuosity of a tenor. This is in contrast to his dramatic cretineri, with their parched surfaces and transitions between the rugged, volcanic textures belonging from the depth with a vibrant bass voice. Here, Burri's works make references to an animate underworld, the artist hailing from the Mediterranean plugs downwards into the bowels of the earth of night, what Jacques Hillman refers to as the imagination and psychology of the Mediterranean is a searching imagination that burrows into the earth, seeking out death, opposing the setting sun, reminding it that life exists in obscurity. This world is not made up of witches and demons, but of an acrid and solitary foreboding of death. This is Maurizio Calvesi essay. He asked me to read. Now, I start to read my intervention. Yes, when I, thank you very much. Which is a Burri contemporary classical. These two terms that are, for me, related on his work, and 100 years have passed since Alberto Burri's birth, but only 20 years since his death. These two coordinates in time are sufficient to explain the title of my intervention. Classical, when art seems to be timeless, and hence referred to as classical, and the contemporary, the last 20, 30 years, still strongly entwined with our present. But it is not simply a temporal issue that allows us today to ascertain that Alberto Burri is a classical of Italian and international art, as well as our contemporary. The reasons can be found throughout the 50 years of his artistic production, marked by independence and originality in his techniques and choice of materials, which made of Burri an inventor of pictorial and extra-pictorial styles of the post-war period. So much so that decade after decade, his originality produced masterpieces of enormous dimensions that exist outside of any idea of time. Indeed, classical, as we understand the term today. But Alberto Burri is classical also because he regarded his work from the very beginning as an absolute truth, shunning imitative reproductions by presenting fragments of the work in their essential and stripped-down objectiveness. Classical, referring to the typical Italian compositional clarity, beginning with Giotto, spanning to Boccioni, Balla, De Chirico, and Morandi, is the concept of space in all his works, where the elements occupy their own space, the means by which these are bound together, albeit in apparent chaos. Classical, in the original understanding of the term, stemming from Greek tragedy, is the dramatic conception of life that emerging emerged in all his works, excluding the last cycle where color became flat, without creases, lumps, cracks, or seams, but brighter and more cheerful. A sense of drama, the fulfillment of inevitable events that make up our visual culture since Masaccio in the Brancacci Chapel, Pollaiolo, Michelangelo, Signorelli, Titian, Caravaggio, and Tintoretto, and in the modern era in Boccioni, and in the contemporary in Burri and his closest follower, Cunellis. The element of fire, thank you. The element of fire, also stemming from Greek classicism, was used often by Burri in the creation of many of his masterpieces, Legni and Plastica. Yes, without volume, yeah. The sacred gift of fire in Greek mythology, Ephesus and Prometheus, revived by Burri, molded and shaped by absolute and timeless visions. What you're seeing right now, it's a film, the only one film authorized by Burri when he was alive in 1994. And there are many images of Burri in action, and then later you can see Burri also walking inside the Creto of Gibellina. It's very interesting. I want to just to put in this moment the part of the film while he is burning the plastic, maybe one of the plastic that they are inside the exhibition right now at the Guggenheim. The term of contemporary has always applied to Burri, from the beginning of his career to his death. He utilized elements appropriated by the contemporary movements, such as recycled materials, sacks, iron, wood, or industrial materials, plastics, clay, tar. We could say that Burri rendered the contemporary classical, elevating the worth of these non-artistic materials in a monumental way. It was a fundamental source of inspiration, as noted often by Maurizio Calvesi and Cesare Brandi, for the polymateric interest of the futurists Boccioni and Prampolini, and the arte povera of the 60s. Probably, without Burri, we would not have had Nouveau Realism or arte povera, all movements that descend from him. In the same way that without the Chirico, we probably would not have had the Surrealists. Let us not forget another fundamental contemporary work, the Creto Gibellina, the most famous Italian work of land art and the biggest in Europe, recently completed on the occasion of the artist's centenary. The earthwork was started in 1981, 13 years after the earthquake that hit the Belgic region of Sicily in 1968. It was made by melting cement that covered entirely the area where the historic center of town collapsed, completely destroyed. It is like a white veil that covers the old city, retracing its original topography. In conclusion, Burri was a revolutionary of art, as were Giotto, Brunelleschi, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and in the modern times Cézanne, Picasso, Brancusi, Duchamp, Boccioni, Kandinsky, Malevich, Rauschenberg, Warhol, Beuys, as a few others, and it is fundamental that he occupy a central position in the contemporary artistic debate, if for no other reason than the fact that he has been a point of reference for a large part of art producing from 50s to present day. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Need a piccolo pausa. Piccolo.
Sì, vabbè, lo facciamo vedere dopo.
Ok. Una piccola pausa.
Oh, are we gonna? Just send it somewhere. Just a tiny, just because they have to change the camera.
Yes.
No, we're just going to change wheels here. Start again. Sorry, we would just needed a moment to change the battery, but we're ready now. Can't hear you? No sound. Okay. I think we don't have sound, according to Dan. Oh yeah. I think there's no sound.
Oh yeah, there is. I can hear you.
Good. And now people are asking that the light be turned off them a little bit.
The only thing is that you won't see them here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. All right.
Should we tell everyone?
Yes.
Alrighty, we're ready. We're gonna start the next speaker. So, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, let me introduce you to Francesca Maria Carraro, who is professor of Arabic language and culture at the Lucio University in Rome. Her fields of research include Arab and Islamic history and literature, comparative literature, anthropology, intercultural and interreligious studies. She has been a visiting professor at the University of Cairo, Dubai, Paris, Cambridge, Oxford, and Shanghai. Her publications include a book on Arab Sicilian poets, the Comedy Festival of Cairo in the 13th century, a critical study of shadow plays in the 13th century, and she edited Echo in Mil Nome, Here is My Name, a collection of poems by the Syrian poet Adonais. This year she published a book on Islam, religion, and politics. Today she's going to be speaking to us about the collaboration between her father and Alberto Burri that resulted in the construction of the largest earthwork art piece in Italy, a memorial to a lost city. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for liking me. I consider myself just a witness. I'm not specialist in art, and so please forgive me if my technical language is not up to your level. But of course, I am a witness and at the same time an enthusiast witness, because I had the great honor to lead a fantastic age since the tragic events of 1968 earthquake in Gibellina until recently, when my father died and I became the president of the Fondazione Orenstiadi. So in a way I was in charge by destiny to take care of this man's story, and of course all his friends who had been working at the creation of this unbelievable art event in Sicily. So this is a picture of Lucio and Burri in front of the Selinunte temple. Now I'll tell you the story of Gibellina, because in a way Burri's Cretto arrives after events have taken place, and many other artists had started cooperating in the rebuilding of the city. So Gibellina, as it has been said before, has been destroyed by the earthquake. This is a picture, and in the 1968, and it was a very, very poor city. It was evident that in a few years the water of the rains would have washed out the story, the memory of this place. And this was Ludovico Corrao, who became the city mayor as he decided to lead the people building the new city. He summoned Sicilian artists and intellectuals to help with their ideas, to fought the indifference of the government, who had provided the victims ticket to the grave. That was the destiny of Sicilians. Whenever we had a tragedy, the sole solution was get out. No way to build something there. No money, no perspective, no hope. So anyway, he believed people had the right to have a dream, and the artist in his thoughts would have been the only one who could have built for them a future. So where we are, in Italy, in Sicily, a very small, tiny little village. And after the earthquake, that was the city as you saw, and this is the new city. What was the story of this new city? Of course, they had to fight in order to get the government, give the money to build the city. And this was after a lot of march and protest, led by major Italian artists. And in fact, among them, as we can see, Leonardo Sciascia, the great Sicilian writer. Then we have Pietro Gonzaga, Ludovico Corrao, Ignazio Buttita, Nino Buttita. They were the first who came in order to support these ideas of asking for money to build the cities in the place where it was. And a lot of young artists came from all over Italy, and among them there was this group of Uccelli, and they came to live with the people in the barracks. People lived in the barracks for almost 17 years. And they were proposing to be the symbol of universal rebirth, the Babel Tower. And in fact, together with them all along in the time, many artists from abroad came. And this was the new city. The new city, as you can see, it looks like a butterfly. And it was built with these strange houses, strange and foreigner to the history of the area. And with these huge streets, which were not protecting any longer from the terrible heat and the sunshine. So it was a terrible prize for the people of the place. The first prize was the earthquake. Second prize was to live in the barracks for many years. And the third prize was to find themselves in a place which was a no-land place. So it was a sudden loss in the life of these people. It was a terrible crisis, and it was psychological depression. And the artists were trying to build, to sew up on top of this incredible reality, a new dream. And this was among the first answers to this strange city. And it was made by two architects, Franco Burini and Laura Tervis. They created this huge square where people could meet and have their market in the Sunday. Or down there was Matthias Unger's project of the square, again, in order to sew together the destiny of faraway built houses. So another important answer was given by Consagra. Consagra thought that the destiny of Ghibellina was not only the destiny of the small city of Ghibellina, but it was the destiny of the whole valley of the Benice, where there were something like 23 other small cities smashed by the earthquake. And he built a star, a huge star, like the Star of Jerusalem, in the memory of the Christianity, a hope, the possibility of building a better future. And these are the other projects made by Consagra and Ghibellina. The meeting, a place where people could meet again to answer to this need of staying together. The theater and the Kremlin Gate, that is the gate to the Botanic Garden. All the artists were thinking to give through their artistic contribution a place around which people could gather and create events. And that is what in fact happened. Here we are, Mimmo Rotella on the left, preparing his sculpture dedicated to the Tommaso Campanella. And here, Arnaldo Pomodoro and Melotti, counterpoint. The answer given by Arnaldo Pomodoro was quite strong because since the very beginning they realized these people had to create a sort of new memory to digest the tragedy. And so they thought, together with Ludovico Corrao and other artists, among those there is Lilas Gro, to create the festival. And the festival was dedicated to Oreste. In fact, the title of the festival is Orestiadi. And this was this eternal journey on the ground to die and rebirth again, to recuperate strength to face reality and the destiny. So the Greek tragedy, which was within the memory of the Sicilian people, was brought back to their memory in dialect, in Sicilian dialect. Also because through this operation, what they wanted to show is that the past and the present, an ancient language like the Greek language and a dialect like the Sicilian dialect, they were always speaking of this eternal event of death and life and rebirth. It is not a case that people like blackout. among the people who answered to the Vicus Corral call, there were Consagra, there were Pomodoro, there were Burri, because they all had lived the trauma of the war. And when they arrived in Ghibellina and they saw the dead body of the city, they could not keep facing again their destiny coming back in front of them, as when they saw it when they were kids, 15, 16, 20. And so they felt they had the duty to give an answer to such a tragedy. They felt they could do it then, at that moment, in Ghibellina, because then, at that moment, they could do something to transform that huge, immense tragedy into an event. It was a crisis, but it was a chance to start again a new life and give hope to people, because they had lived in their life this opportunity. They had went through the drama of the war and came out of it. And so they felt it was a mission for them to give hope. And they chose the whole old Ghibellina as a great scenario for their theater play. Sorry. And so Arnaldo Pomodoro made the scenography for the Oresiadi, and later other artists came, and finally, the city was rebuilt, and many sculptures were here and there in the city. And the Oresiadi was going, and the festival was fantastic. But then, at a certain moment, it was 1979, 80s, when Corrao invited Burri, because he thought that something had to be done with the ruins. Something had to be done because in few years, the whole thing would have been simply washed out in rains. And when Burri first arrived in Ghibellina, he said, I'll never be doing something here. It was too far away from his feelings, because it was a new city with all these cultures. Yes, it was interesting, but it has nothing to see with his story, with his activity, with his architecture and art. Here it is another part of Ghibellina, but now we go further on. This is the church built by Ludovico Baroni and Anversa. So, and this is the tower of the city by Mendini, and that is the homage to Tommaso Campanella by Mimmo Rotella. So in the summer of 79, he said, here I don't make anything. But then Corrao took him to the old city, and this is what he saw. And of course he was shocked, because he had experienced the war, and as I told you, he felt like Corrao and like Consagra, he had to do something. He was shocked, he didn't say much, but immediately after, Corrao took him to Segesta. Segesta is an archaeological site built at the time of the Elimi, a population who was living in Sicily before the Greek, and this was a theater. And this was something, I will read you what Ludovico Corrao wrote in his memory. Burri took photos of the ancient theater at sunset, which in some way refer to the images of the cracks of the earth. He said, the light at sunset cuts harsh shadows on the steps of the auditorium of the Eleni Theatre of Segesta. Burri later said to Corrao that this vision was the spark that triggered his ideas to build the Creto. He had then the need to establish a historical thread between Segesta and Selinunte, to write a page of history. It would seem the history of marginalized people that this, through his work of art, became the story of their redemption. And in fact, he had the idea to compact the rabble and make a huge white crab. There was no budget, no interest, nowhere for contemporary art. Of course, Lucio Garau was absolutely mad, going around looking for money to build such a huge sculpture out of the dead body of a very poor city where no one would ever go for no reason, because it was really nowhere land. So what he did, he started blackmailing all the people who was working in the new Gibellina, saying, if you want to build something here in Gibellina, you have to give something to build the Cretto of Burri. Then he went to the army, and he asked the army to help with their people to put together the rubble. And then he went to the Italcementi, the Italian famous important industry producing cement, saying, you have to give your contribution to the memory of our land. Gibellina is just a symbol. These poor people are just poor people, but this is our story. We have to write a new story in our today, present day, with this new important sculpture. So, as you can understand, it was an epic job that they could do it. He also applied to receive funds for works of hydrogeological or urban site. I undercite this because we have colleagues here who are interested about these hydrological works, and it shows how they can be useful and important and connected with art and land art.
Or the cement is necessary to have the water.
Exactly, exactly. They needed water. Yeah. And so we have the Cretto, but I heard my colleague Alberto has a film, and it would be worth having a look at the film. But of course, the film at the Guggenheim is fantastic, so that could be the best anyway. So I would tell you what Garau was writing about the Cretto. On one hand, Cretto refers to the symbolism of the labyrinth and the Minotaur, intended as the hidden monster to defeat: pain, death, hell, cruel gods, absurd destiny, forgetfulness. On the other hand, also the aridity of the desert, the silence after death, nothing, being. Artists have wandered in Gibellina as if it was the labyrinth of time and space, to look for the exit to eternity. The Cretto is the work more full of suggestions. The great Cretto is a labyrinth of calcinated alleys, a blinding light, the destroyed city, the sidereal, the dream, a symbol, a pure thought. The Cretto is perhaps the most representative symbols of a possible path of rebirth, of Gibellina in Sicily, but in the broadest sense of all wastelands. The Cretto, in fact, inspired Bob Wilson and Philip Glass. They created the famous representation in Gibellina, The Wasteland, by T.S. Eliot. The poster was inspired by Burri. In fact, it represented a crack in the desert and dry land, labyrinth like the cracks as the eye can see, and a man on a bowler hat that seems to be buried or emerged from the land. The theater was an event of real and surreal refounding of a city and its civilization. Cretto, in Garau's word, is still like the famous representation of Beckett, a moan, birth, silence, another cry, death, silence. The Cretto is a curtain and even a sidereal in the aftermath of earthquake. In 1987, Burri visited for the first and last time the Cretto. He was so happy. Corrao had made his dream come true. And here it is, in fact, the day after when they went to Selinunte, no? Visiting the archaeological site in Selinunte, the Decreto was outstanding as the ancient ruins. It succeeded in giving new life to the dead city. Now no one could forget. So in this scene, I was there. They were just fooling around one another, saying, "Ah, you're the genius," and the other was saying, "Nah, you made it." They were so funny, these two men. They really like each other. And this is a performance made on the Decreto by Giancarlo Neri, and it is an homage to Burri, and that was also performed in the night of the presentation of the, let's say, the vernissage of the complete work that has been inaugurated in the 17th of October in Ghibellina. And this is another pictures, is a photo taken by Marzia Migliora, who was awarded the first prize for a photo dedicated to the Contemporary Art Day in 2013. That means how the Decreto is still alive, and of course, here I give just for information about how big it is. Decreto, it goes all along the old roads. And the main idea was the fact that the people, this is what architect Zammati wrote. He was helping Burri in planning how to build the Decreto over the ruins. The idea was to give the people the possibility to walk along the old roads, to reach the old cathedral, the old church, to find the place that was once the marketplace. And so the surface area is 300 for 400 meters, and the area is 12 hectares. And the debris were used into blocks and covered with white cement. And the paths among the blocks, whose average age is 160 meters, follow the way of the old streets. And another very important thing is about the Decreto. It is a dialogue. It is a dialogue between people who survived and the people who were buried. A dialogue between the old city and the countryside. Because all around, if you look at the countryside, it is incredible, the shapes of the small pieces of land. They look like a small Decreto, as if the city is the mirror of the countryside. Just before ending, what happened is that at a certain point, Corrao was not any longer the mayor of the city of Ghibellina, and the people forgot, and nobody went, and nobody found the money to make theater play, and it was abandoned, and that was a serious problem. But Corrao did not lose his hope. He created a foundation, or a Stiali Foundation, and what you see is Mimo Paladino Salt Mountain. It is the scenery of another theater play that was made at the Decreto. And he created this foundation in order to keep alive the memory, to work privately, to keep alive the memory. And in 2010, thanks to Nicola Stabile, who is an artist born in Ghibellina, they started thinking of react and create something in order to wake up people and raise money to complete the Decreto. My father wanted to finish the Decreto before he died. And with the help of a lot of artists, again, with the help of the artists and many intellectuals, American and Italian intellectuals, the government, the Sicilian government, moved and found the money to finish the Cretto. Now, there is a great problem, last problem. The old Cretto is gray, and the new Cretto is sparkling white. What are we going to do? And now there's a fantastic debate among those who wants just to paint white, the old one, and other who wants a serious study from a restoration point of view that would be important from a technical point of view, but at the same time extremely difficult because it would be very, very expensive. So this is the point of the situation. What I can say now is that I hope you will organize another exhibition for the Cretto in Ghibellina. And you will please come and visit this place of rebirth and hope, where artists, and especially Burri and Corrao, show to the world that it was possible to create out of a disaster a fantastic, creative work of art. It is just a question of a strong will and awareness that each human being has endless powers. Thank you very much.
I think now there's coffee has arrived, I hope. So we can have a pause now. Let's have a 20-minute break, okay?
I'll do break.
Where is coffee? It's already there. It's already here. Isn't it this one?
Yes. You know, I'd like to
Oh,
Is it
oh, you have another?
another one because I thought that
So this
it's
is
not.
yours?
It's another series. Yeah.
Here we go. And then inject it.
No, we can after it's open.
Okay, perfect. I just want to inject. Let's just inject this.
I have to wait. So I expect.
Yes.
No problem. Okay. But,
Now you can take it out.
yeah.
There we go.